think around text 30. Let's take a look. Yes, we are. As far as context goes, Krishna was explaining the thickness and the intimacy of his relationship with his devotee and the miraculous nature of that relationship. You look confused.
No.
Okay. You should probably learn how to not look confused while you're listening. Because there's an exchange going on, you look confused. Krishna was waxing eloquent about the specialness of his relationship with his devotee. He said that whereas others might perform a huge multi-million-dollar ritual, his devotees don't have to do anything but just think of him. And the exclusiveness of their devotion attracts Krishna so much that he becomes obliged and willingly involved in bringing them what they need, carrying them what they lack, preserving what they have. And if the devotees do engage in ritual, it's the simplest ritual, just offering Krishna a leaf of flower, a fruit, or water. But because they offer it with love, then Krishna will personally eat that offering. And the devotees aren't limited to just doing that. Their whole life becomes an offering. Everything they do, everything they offer, everything they think of, everything they're dedicated to, whatever austerities they perform, whatever words they speak, their whole life becomes an offering to Krishna. And so for people who are in that situation, they've transcended ritual. And whatever ritual they engage in is just a vehicle for their devotion. And you create a contrast between ritualistic people who get materialistic results from their rituals, who don't have a devotional relationship with the divine, who Krishna is not personally involved with, who are just interfacing with the law of karma. And on the other hand, you have Krishna's devotees who are just thinking of Krishna. Their whole life is dedicated to Krishna. And whatever rituals they engage in are just vehicles for their love. And then Krishna thought, maybe I went too big. Maybe these ritualistic people are going to feel like I'm partial, like I'm playing favorites. And so then we have text 29, Samoham Sarvabhuteshu, I'm equal to all. And we explored that text last week. We're not going to do it again. And then after having explained that, he says, the last line is, Ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya. But those who bhajanti, they worship me, bhaktya, with bhakti. It's like a doubling up of the word bhakti. They worship me. It's the same root. Bhaj means to worship. It actually means to share. And it's the oldest versions you'll see of the verbal root. Bhaj will be used to indicate sharing. And so that becomes the word bhakti as a noun, but it also becomes as a verb. It's conjugated. Bhajanti, they worship me. But really they do bhakti to me. Bhaktya, with devotion. Just like Krishna previously said, they offer to me with devotion. Bhaktya prayachati, then that thing which was offered with devotion, tadaham bhaktupahritam, that's the thing I eat. So he's used the word bhakti twice in that verse too, and the word bhakti is being used twice in this verse as well. And then Krishna says, te mai api teshu, te mai, they're in me, api teshuham, and I'm in them. And that we spent all of class last week exploring that very important statement. They're in me, I'm in them. Okay. And so then the next verse comes. And the next verse is related to the introduction I just gave, which is why I gave this introduction. And you should be able to, when I go through the verse with you, you should be able to understand how it's related to the preceding verses. Because I explained to you exactly how it's related to the preceding verses just now. You don't know it yet. And I'm going to leave it to you to figure out the connection. And I'm expecting you to all get it. If you weren't listening to the introduction, then you're automatically exempted from being able to connect the dots. Raise your hand if you didn't listen to the introduction. Then you're all still in the running. So here we go, okay? You will look at these verses and you're going to see how they're connected to the preceding verses. And I made it so unbelievably easy for you. Because the introduction I gave was surgically designed to show you the main and major points of connection. Here we go. Apichet, even if. Suduracharo, even if it is a very badly behaved person. Achar means behavior. And durachar means bad, like a badly behaved person. This is the subject of the sentence. Even if there's a badly behaving person. But su is a modifier. It means like even more so. Like it can mean, like, you know, like you'd be su sundar. It's using the word su twice, but even like especially beautiful. And so su smita, like you're smiling very beautifully. But su in this case is modifying the word in front of it. And if it's bad, a badly behaved person, then su in front of it means an incredibly and exquisitely badly behaved person. Like the worst person. Apichet, even if. Su durachara, even if the person is incredibly badly behaved. Bhajate, and they worship. Mom, they worship me. Ananya bhak. Ananya bhak means, anya means other. Ananya means no other. Ananya bhak means devoted to no other. It's the same root bhaj, but as bhaj, and so becomes bhak. And so ananya bhak, devoted to no other. Even if the person is incredibly badly behaved, if they worship me and they are devoted to no one else. Sadur eva hi mantavya. They should be thought of as a sadhu. Mantavya means from mana, mind. So they to think. Mantavya is gerundive. It's a verb which is turned into an adjective and is used to communicate something that should be done. And so in this case, it's like it would be equivalent to translating it as he should be thought of, he must be thought of, he even modifies it further, he must only be thought of, he must certainly be thought of, he must exclusively be thought of. Eva certainly, Eva he certainly only be thought of, sadhu, as a sadhu, a righteous person, a devoted person, a pious person, a saintly person. Sadhureva hi mantavya. Apichet, even if, suduracharo, the person is incredibly badly behaved. Bhajatemam, but they worship me. Ananyabhak, devoted to no one else. Sadur eva hi mantavya, they must certainly only are to be thought of as a sadhu. Samyak vyavyasito hi saha. Saha, he or she is. He, only, certainly. Samyak vyavyasitaha, proper in their determination. Therefore, they should be thought of as sadhu, even if they're poorly behaved. Even if someone is incredibly sinful and poorly behaved. Durachar means like sinful, like criminal. Sudurachar is even worse, like a bad criminal. Apiched, even if suduracharo is a criminal. Bhajatemam, he worships me. Ananyabhak, devoted to no other. Sadureva hi mantavya, he must certainly only be thought of as a sadhu. Samyak vyavyasito hi saha, because he is properly situated in his determination and his resolve. That's verse number 1. Translation. Even if one commits the most abominable action, Prabhupada, of course, is going even bigger. It's like not a misdemeanor, a felony. But Prabhupada, the most abominable action. Prabhupada is, because Krishna is being extreme in his language, and so Prabhupada is mirroring Krishna in English. If he's engaged in devotional service, he's to be considered saintly because he's properly situated in his determination. It's a pretty straight translation, 4 lines. Even if completely sinful, he's engaged in devotional service, he worships me and no one else. He's to be considered saintly. He should only be thought of as a sadhu because he's properly situated in his determination. So Prabhupada translates the 4 lines of the verse smoothly. And there you go. Let's do the next verse. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma. Quickly he is a dharmatma, a dharmic soul. Quickly he is a dharmic soul. Quickly he becomes a dharmic soul. Shashvat shantim nigachati. And he goes to eternal peace. That doesn't mean dies. It just means he goes to a place of self-realization where he becomes eternally peaceful. Kaunteya pratijanihi. Understand this, Arjun. Pratijanihi means, it's in the imperative. And it means know this, understand this. Pratigya. Pratijanihi. Know this. Name bhakta pranashati. My devotee does not perish, is not destroyed. Quickly, he is a righteous soul. Quickly he becomes a dharmic soul. Shashvat shantim nigachati, and he goes to supreme peace. Kaunteya pratijanihi, and this is in the imperative. The gerundive is you should do this. The imperative is you must do this. Like the imperative in English was read this book. See that? You could read this book. You should read this book. Right? But if I say read this book, or alternatively you must read this book, it becomes an injunction I'm ordering you to do something. That's the imperative in Sanskrit. Pratijanihi. Know this, Arjun. Name bhakta pranashati. My devotee never perishes. He quickly becomes righteous and attains lasting peace. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly. Make others know this, that my devotee never perishes. So Prabhupada takes it from understand this to make others understand this. Teach this to others, that my devotee never perishes. But again, it's a clean translation. The 4 points are mentioned. He quickly becomes righteous, attains lasting peace, declare boldly, my devotee never perishes. The 4 critical points from the 4 lines, all in order. Clean translation. Not almost literal, but very clean in the way Prabhupada follows exactly Krishna's train of thought and turns it into a simple statements. Okay. It should be obvious. I do not want to troubleshoot the verses yet. We are going to spend the bulk of class troubleshooting the verses. But what I want to do is have you guys connect the dots for me. Go. Yes. Let's let you go later. Do you know why? Okay. Go. Everybody else knows why? Because he's stupid. I don't like to hear him talk. No, because Dom is smart. And he'll most likely take up all the big answers. And then it'll be very difficult to think of anything to say after him. So he's going to play. It's like, we want you guys are going to be like the first batter up, like the first guy, get on base. And then we'll let Dom be the home run hitter, batting fourth in a traditional baseball lineup. Go ahead.
Krishna previously emphasized the importance of worshiping him with devotion, and it seems as though now he's doubling down on how much he really means worshiping him with devotion is the most important thing he wants to do.
I think that's clean. I think that's the major point. Krishna spoke about worshiping him with devotion in the previous verse, and now he's making it really clear just what the fruits of that devotion are, how he gets involved in helping his devotee. Sure. There's a lot left to say, but if I could only say one sentence and make one point, that would probably be it. If I could have a run-on sentence, I'd make a few other points. But that was pretty clean. It's like an A. You got it. You had your hand up?
Yeah.
And if you want to say the same thing someone else said, just try and say it in your own words. And then you can still get credit for it. Go ahead.
Yeah, in the previous verses, he's saying how, if you think about me, you'll be liberated. I'm equal to everyone. Even if you do abominable actions, you're very sinful. Thinking about me is the goal.
Okay, so now you have, I'm equal to everybody. Everybody has a chance with me if they worship me. And therefore, if you worship me, irrespective of your starting place, I'm going to help you. You try to connect it to that think of me verse, which is like 5-6 verses back. It's a little bit of a tenuous connection, a little bit of a thin connection. But to just clean up what you said a little bit, because you mentioned that twice, like it was something you wanted to really include, trying to connect all the verses. But it's a little bit of an awkward fit because he's jumped back and forth a few times. But I'm equal to everybody. Everyone has a chance. If you worship me, that's enough. And here's the completeness of worship, because it's enough to fix whatever ails you. Right? That's clean too. Very similar to what you said. A little different though. You've Focus on the idea of I'm equal to everybody, therefore this is an opportunity which is available to everybody. You focused in on, I'm speaking about worship now and how special it is, and here's more on that. So you focused on this being an evolute of Krishna's egalitarianism and his equalness, and you focused on it being an addendum to Krishna's statements about the power of bhakti. And they're both, of course, totally compatible with one another. But you didn't focus on the equalness, and you highlighted that and included her point. So in some ways what you said was more complete. Did you follow that? Okay, Bailey. Also good. Super clean, good, innovative. I hadn't thought to link this verse to the equalness thing. Were you here last week? And you didn't hear the lecture. Had you heard that lecture, you probably wouldn't have either, because we dove into the verse in considerable detail. But at a glance, it was intelligent, very, very smart. You did a good job. It's A. It's good. Had you been here last week, you would see why there might be something missing from it. But as just from prima facie, from a first glance, looking at these verses, it's a very clean analysis. Bailey.
So in verse 30, it talks about this person who is committing abominable actions and also to be considered a saintly person if they're executing devotional service, which is kind of hard to reconcile because on the one hand you have someone doing abominable actions, but we should consider them saintly. And according to the previous verse, when we broke it down last week to understand it, an additional meaning that Prabhupada brought up, was that Krishna is actually, in fact, partial to his devotees. And he, directly in verse 29, Krishna says, the devotee that executes devotional service, I am actually in him. So this person that is executing devotional service actually has Krishna in him. Krishna is partial towards him, and that is why we should consider him a saint, even though on the surface we're seeing him commit abominable actions.
That's good. I like it. Really good. Different than what anybody else has said. I'll just recap what you've said. It was a little choppy. It's even choppy in your mind, but that's okay. You're working through an idea. And so that choppiness is allowable. When I work through ideas, I'm also choppy. And you have to learn to hang with the person enough to get where they're going and not just turn off because it's not eloquent and smoothly worded. I think you hit a big point. Krishna has explained just how special the devotee is and just what a thick relationship they have. And there's a number of ways to reconcile that. What the one we'll go with today is that the devotees become receptive to Krishna, which allows Krishna to be very, very active in that devotee's life. How active? So active that even if he's sinful on some level, you can see Krishna is within him and see Krishna working within him and see Krishna helping him. And that should be enough for that person to think he's saintly. Right? It's clean. It's you're focusing on the instruction of Krishna to view him as saintly. Why? Because he's open to Krishna. Of course, the huge question that creates, that you did not answer and you exacerbated. It was already a problem with the verse and you just made it way worse. But that's okay because we're not troubleshooting that yet. What's the problem?
How can you tell if that person's actually...
If the person has Krishna so actively within them, then why are they behaving poorly? Right? You know, there's a philosophical position called Antinomianism, which we mostly encounter with certain forms of Christianity where people say, I can do anything because Jesus is in my heart and I've accepted Jesus. And therefore, whatever I do doesn't matter. And we consider such a position to be preposterous. But this verse seems to support that antinomian perspective. And that's problematic. And you, of course, just doubled down with that. But Krishna said it. So for you to be like, here's what Krishna's saying isn't wrong because Krishna spoke in a way which creates this doubt. And so as you are summarizing what Krishna said, distilling what Krishna said, essentializing what he said, it's natural that you would, the more you highlight that problem, the more you've done a good job of distilling the verse, because the verse creates that massive doubt in anybody's mind who reads it, and therefore the more you create that doubt in your summarization, the better job you've done. So you're not faulted for that. And of course, you're in a different position than the two of you guys. You guys both spoke well. You focus on the equalness, and therefore the door is open to all, and here's what that looks like. You focused on Bhakti was explored in the previous verse in a pretty substantial way, previous verses in a pretty substantial way, and now this verse is doubling down on that. And you focused on the idea that it says you should think of him as sadhu. Why? Because Krishna's in his heart. And that's enough. And he's in everybody's heart, but he's really in this person's heart. Because Krishna says, I'm in him, even though he's not in everybody else. Everybody else is in Krishna, but Krishna isn't in them. But here Krishna's saying, no, I'm even in him, because he's worshiping me, opening that door to me, and therefore I'm there. And that leaves us wondering, well, why would that person then behave in such a sinful way? And you've done a good job of distilling Krishna's speech down to its essential points, because we have the same doubt in your speech. More. These are excellent. You guys have all brought your A game tonight, and I really appreciate it. Normally I would ask you guys, tell you this, and you guys would just fall, just almost like slapstick comedy. Like, I almost sometimes think you guys are joking with me. But we're 3 for 3. You guys all did really well tonight. I first Diana, and then Atulia. Yes?
Well, my point gets to the same issues as David.
That's just fine.
The connections I see in verse 29, it really highlights that Krishna gives special mercy onto his devotees. He's partial to his devotee in special mercy. In text 30, what's highlighted to me is if someone does devotional service and devote to him, and therefore they're beyond materialism, they're like no longer we're going to get attached to Maya, essentially. And then in text...
No. Because he says, you said text 30, he says that. He says they are attached to Maya. Because if you're behaving in an abominable way, then you are in illusion, and you are attached to Maya, and you are doing something wrong. Here's the point you were trying to make. You got lost. The point you were trying to make, and then you can pick it up again with the next verse, was that Krishna spoke about the special mercy he gives to the devotee, which is so great that even if the devotee is very sinful, Krishna appreciates him and wants others to as well. And then the next verse says...
In text 31, it's with that special mercy of the devotee.
That's what you want to say, right? What I just said? You just got jammed up, right?
Yeah.
But I thought you were going to say it, and then you got halfway there and you messed up. You zigged when you should have zagged, right? Say it properly now. Start from the beginning.
Okay. I'm like getting a little...
No, don't do that. You're getting nervous. You're not spacing out. You're getting nervous. Don't do that. Take a deep breath. Stay focused. Don't disassociate. You're making good points. You got a little, zigged when you should have zagged. I just modeled it for you. I picked up what you were trying to say. I modeled it for you. Now you say it. And take a few deep breaths. You want to make 3 points. Text 29 says?
That devotees of Krishna have special mercy.
Special mercy. That was the key point you made, right? Mm-hmm. Excellent. Text 30 says?
They're protected by Krishna.
That special mercy means that Krishna will help them even if they're very sinful. Say it.
Krishna will protect them and help them even if they're sinful because of the special mercy.
Bingo. 29 and 30 have now been joined together. And then 31 it says?
And because of the protection of Krishna, they'll never fall.
Or they'll become rectified. He doesn't say they'll never fall. He says they'll become righteous and go to everlasting peace. There's nothing that says they won't fall. In fact, the indication of the verse is they did fall, and Krishna's going to pick them up. So even if they did fall, Krishna's going to pick them up, which again is a special mercy. It's good. Good stuff. Speaking publicly is not easy. Keeping your thoughts while you're speaking publicly is not easy. My problem is when you guys have really stupid ideas. If you guys have good ideas and just have a hard time getting them out, I'll be your friend. It's just when I take the trouble to explain to you guys everything really nicely, and then what you come back with, it's almost like you're schizophrenic, because you come back with just the weirdest stuff. Provided you're not doing that, and you didn't do that, provided you have a solid point to make, if you get a little jumbled up or a little nervous, a little gun shy, that's not a fault. You still get an A. You're good. I picked up what you were saying. You're good. Don't be ashamed. Don't be bummed. If you want to become a great speaker, am I a great speaker? You want to become a great speaker? This is the path. This is how you do it. You mess up. You try. People correct you. You go mess up a little less than last time. Then they correct you again. You mess up a little less than last time. They correct you again. I'm 51. I've been doing this since I was 16. My gurus still correct me everything I say. They'll teach me something, and I'll repeat it back to them, and they'll be like, no, you got it wrong. And I'll tell it to them again. And I'll be like, okay, I got this. And they'll be like, no, you still got it wrong. I'll tell it to them again. I will do that 3 or 4 times, and I'll finally be like, okay, like, you know, like we get to a point where it's like, I've done as much as I can do. I just don't quite get it because I'm not on their level. There's just a fineness of movement I can't replicate. You get it? So you're just working on getting some movement, some consistent movement, and then we'll just clean it up for decades. If we're hanging out together for decades, I'll be doing this for you for decades. And you'll get to where it's really clean, and we'll just keep raising the bar. Okay? You got it? Hatuya.
I want to piggyback off of what Shri
But don't get triggered and become ashamed. I'm helping you to get better. I believe in you. You're good. You had a nice realization. You connected the 3 verses very nicely together. Perhaps better than anybody else. Connected the 3 verses together. You had a real nice connection. Special mercy, which means even if you're sinful, you should still be sadhu, and my special mercies, I'll rectify you. It's a nice, clean thread of continuity that you traced out between the 3 verses. It's just hard to articulate it. You know? Okay? But don't go into a shame spiral. You won't be able to stay present. You won't learn your lesson. You'll end up being mental about it. Don't do that. Sometimes I got to chastise you guys because you just do things which are profoundly, just like unprecedentedly foolish. This was not that. This was, you had a great point to make, and you just stumbled just a little bit while you were making it. You get it? All 4 of you have done a great job. Yes?
To elaborate on what Shri was saying about doubling down on bhakti here, I thought Krishna was doing it in such a bold way, talking about somebody who's abominable, and I was thinking about like the most abominable person having a chance, and I thought he was also bold for saying, my devotee never perishes, and also very encouraging. So no matter where you're at, what you have done in your past, that you still have a chance, and Krishna's like never going to forget you.
Number 1, you get an A just because it was actually hard to pay attention to what you were saying because you spoke so clearly and confidently and loudly that I was just mesmerized by like how well spoken you are. And I was just, did you guys have that reaction? I almost couldn't understand what you were saying. I was like, wow, she's a really good speaker. And I was just you had the same reaction? So they've known each other since high school. They were best friends in high school.
I was just thinking that it's so nice to hear her talking about Krishna.
Like full double initiated devotee, speaking eloquently about Krishna, your friend from high school that you went on a road trip with. So crazy. So you spoke really well. You get an A just for that. And the points you made were solid. how powerful the statement is that this person should only be thought of as a sadhu, and how then doubly powerful the statement is, declare it boldly, my devotee never perishes. There's a real boldness in Krishna speech. There's a real confidence in Krishna's speech. There's a shamelessness in Krishna's speech. He's putting his heart on, wearing his heart on his sleeve. You really picked up on these two verses. And you kind of you run. Don't trip. Shh. Go close the door, outside door. Thank you. Go quickly. Don't slip. Close the outside door and lock it. Thank you. I think you did the best job of anybody, and the best job that anybody could ever do. Ever. Of picking up on the heart and the flavor of these two verses. They're both very bold. They both make radical statements. The first statement is, sadhu eva hi mantavya, you should only be thought of as a sadhu. And the second radical statement is, name bhakta pranashati, that my devotee never perishes. Radical statements by Krishna. You picked up on both of them. And you go. She's not allowed in the kitchen again. She's just out of the kitchen entirely. I'm just going to say it again because I lost my train of thought, and I really want to make sure that I give you this feedback properly. There's a flavor to the verse. The flavor of both verses is boldness, confidence, and taking a radical position. Sadhu eva hi mantavya and name bhakta pranashati. My devotee never perishes, and he should only be thought of as a sadhu. You picked up on that. Therefore, your analysis of these two verses is the best analysis. No better analysis could ever be given. It's the heart of the verses. You agree, Dom? Yeah. And in fact, I feel like I better understand the verses having heard what you said. I feel like I learned something about the verses. You agree? That's not what I asked, but it's okay. And that's actually, it's great, because that gets to the point I want to make. Dom did not respond to what I said. I said, I learned something about the verse. I made a humble statement as a teacher of the class. Dom, because he has a colossal ego, couldn't say that. He said it was really nice. I don't actually think you have a colossal ego, but he didn't respond to what I said. You also didn't respond to my question. My question is, how are these verses connected with the preceding verses? You didn't do that. You analyzed the verses in their own right, which is what a Vaisheshika Maharaj would have taught you how to do. But that's not what I asked. I asked you to connect the verses to the preceding verse. You get an A just because of your just incredible speaking ability. And it was just like the perfect level of loudness. Just, like I didn't have to strain at all to hear anything you said. Everything you said was clear and articulate and confidently stated, and one point rolled into the next without any pause other than a pause for dramatic effect. Get an A for that. Even if what you said was nonsense, just because you spoke so well, you get an A for that. Then you got to the heart of the verses, so you got like a double A. And we're not giving out anything but A's today. But you didn't answer my question. My question was to connect the preceding verses to this verse. We always want to do that because we want to get in the current of the Gita. We want to get in the current of the Gita. Once we've done that, we're in the current of the Gita, then listen to this again. Once we pick up the flavor of the section we're in, and we get in the divine current of Krishna's speech, and we have a feeling for what he's trying to communicate from one point to the next, and we pick up on that train of thought and that logic, then we can troubleshoot the verses most effectively. It's an exercise in preparing for exegetics. We get in the divine current and the flow of the verses. And once we're in that current and we're flowing with the verses through the points that are being made in a section, then when we come to an individual verse that needs to be troubleshot, we have the richness of the preceding section to help facilitate our troubleshooting. And we're not just troubleshooting looking at a single verse, we're troubleshooting looking at a selection of verses which are part of this chunk of Krishna's speech. If you just look at the verse by itself, without having in your mind the preceding verses, you'll have a harder time troubleshooting the verse. Do you follow that? Okay, we got Draupadi and then Dom. Go ahead.
The preceding verses were...
No, you didn't. You know what? Unfortunately, you didn't show up on time. And here's the reason. Because I gave a breakdown of the preceding verses specifically designed to connect into this verse. And so you didn't hear that. But you know what? You were here last week. And so I'm just going to go ahead and throw my... I said, if you remember, I said, raise your hand if you didn't hear this. And I said, okay, you guys can all participate. And then you walked in afterwards. But I'm gonna drop my previous, my prerequisite that I stated at the beginning, because you were here last week, and I want to hear the connections you see. Go ahead.
Okay, well, with that, thank you. I'm thinking about in these previous verses, we have such this current of like, this is pure love, this is the intimacy you can reach with Krishna, this is like the ultimate, and then we're slipping in with these like, you're still human, people are gonna mess up, I still love you, that love that we just talked about is still the
That's a really nice point. So we get this idealized version of devotion that Krishna is glorifying, and then Krishna makes a very practical statement that even if you're human and you mess up, and even though you may have inadequacies or frailties or shortcomings, I still love you. I'm still going to help you. I still see the best in you. That's really nice. Also, something I had not thought of. And so both Atulya's, the way she spoke, really communicated something to me. And the points you made also. I think they're really nice takes on the verse. And yours is very innovative. Yours is very chaste to the verse. Yours is quite innovative. It's almost like a mixing of some modern psychology and therapeutic type stuff with the verse in a way that I think fits like a hand in a glove. It's not artificial, and it's not staccato, and it's not choppy, and it's not forced. It feels like it fits, and Krishna is being a bit therapeutic. So yeah, I like it. Good. Excellent. Okay, Dom, you. And feel free to restate what they've stated in your own words. Like, I don't mind. They gave a lot, so like if they stole some of your ideas, don't feel like you have to come up with something completely original. Just say what you want to say, and feel free. Like, ignore that they've spoken before you if you want to.
That's what I'll say first is speaking out after everyone is going to be a lot better than if I come first.
Yeah.
But I'm imagining Krishna speaking to Arjuna, and then maybe there's someone hearing who's big ritualist. They're out, they're elaborate rituals. But then they hear Krishna criticizing the person, like, oh yeah, it's so elaborate, but you don't get the point. I am the sacrifice. And my devotee can offer such a simple thing, and that's accepted with love. And And so then that ritualist says, you're not fair. You know, I'm doing all this, and why do you appreciate this little fruit, flower, and water? And Krishna says, no, it's fair for everyone. The rules are the same for everyone. By the law of karma, you do good, you get good. You do bad, you get bad. It's fair. But in that law of karma, there's no mutual love. It's just almost mechanical thing. You do this, you get this. It's not really a relationship. But my devotee has a relationship with me that's mutual. I also have feeling for my devotee. And I'm in their heart, and they're in my heart. And the ritualist hears that. They still don't like it. And say, yeah, well, look at your devotee. Look at this fault. Look what he did. Look at this. And pointing out all those faults. And then Krishna's taking that devotee under his arm and saying, no, even if he commits the most abominable actions, you should consider him saintly. And he's like very strongly taking that devotee fully under his care and saying, and he will become rectified. And you should declare this boldly.
Excellent. That's really good. Not repetitive at all. And I also learned from what you said. You went in a little different direction than me about 3/4 of the way through. I thought you were going to say, anyway, just to repeat what Dom said for other people. Krishna's critiquing ritual. He's glorifying his devotee. The ritualist may become offended and critique the devotee. And Krishna makes the point that my devotee and I have a very thick relationship. It's not just the law of karma. They've opened the door for me to be personally involved in their life, and so I am. And so I love them the way, if you're a mother and your son becomes a murderer, you still love him. You still see the good in him because he's your son. And Krishna's really taking ownership of his devotee. And he's saying, don't think ill of them. I'm personally telling you not to. It's my injunction. And I'm even going to fix them. That discrepancy you see, I'm going to repair that. And I'm personally involved in my devotee's life such that whatever discrepancy is there, I'm going to take responsibility for helping to clean that up. I thought you were going to go there. And you did, kind of. But you jumped into this... The way you analyzed the verse was that, don't find fault in them because they're close to me. I think you were saying that. Maybe I thought, did I just repeat what you said? Did I add to what you said? That's what you meant? Okay. Then I didn't go in a different direction than you. I felt that you, instead of going into this, I'm in their heart, I love them even though they're doing bad things, and I see the best in them and I'm going to bring that out of them. I wasn't sure that you were headed like you were doing that. It seemed like you were more saying just shutting the door on criticism, and Krishna was like saying, like, I'm their big brother.
Krishna shutting the door on that ritualist who wants to criticize the devotee.
Yeah. Maybe I just didn't quite pick up what you were saying, or I thought you weren't getting it, but you did. I'm okay with that. It was excellent though. I felt inspired hearing what you said. And the thing I felt most inspired by that I hadn't thought of was this idea that there's a law of karma, and then there is bhakti. And bhakti is different than karma because bhakti means Krishna has a personal relationship with you. And that has to be mutual, that has to be consensual. And so when the devotee opens themselves up to that relationship, that allows Krishna to take ownership like this. Whereas otherwise he wouldn't be able to, because he'd be bound by the law of karma to just give you what you deserved. And the devotee is opening the door up for a miracle to occur, because they're willing to accept Krishna's love and Krishna's chastisement and Krishna's blessing and Krishna's therapy. I got that from what you said. But I never thought of the verse like that there's karma for the ritualist and for the devotee it's bhakti, and this opens a door for miraculous things like this to occur. That would never occur for a ritualist. If you do something that's karmically faulty, then the ritual's over. You've messed up. And the path of devotion is such that you can't mess up. Even you're doing the wrong thing, you'll still be rectified. Okay, good. Excellent. Everybody did a good job. If I was going to unpack what was said, it's this. Krishna said, you can perform a big sacrifice and you won't get any lasting benefit. Or you can do nothing and just think of me. And that's enough. And I'll carry you what you lack and preserve what you have. Because you're in me and I'm in you. And I'm now going to personally rectify you if you get into trouble. And I'm going to protect you. And I'm going to tell the whole world that this is how I feel about you, and that if they don't agree with me, they're actually going against me. I'm going to stand in front of you, put myself in harm's way. I'm going to stand for you. And let the whole world know that I'm not going to let you fall. I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to make you righteous again. Because I told you that I'll carry you what you lack and preserve what you have. And therefore your discrepancy, your fault becomes my responsibility. And I'm going to inject myself in your situation because you opened the door for me to do that because you're practicing bhakti. Do you guys see that? You just have to think of me. Not do any ritual even. And whatever ritual you do will be very simple. But the real thing is love. And you've opened the door for that loving relationship. And I'm going to carry you what you lack and preserve what you have. How much? So much so. You're in me and I'm in you. That your fault becomes my fault and my responsibility. And I'm going to put my neck on the line. You vouch for this person? Yeah, I vouch for him. So you're responsible if they do something wrong. Yep. Sometimes you'll say to somebody, you trust him? Yeah, I trust him. You vouch for them? Yeah, I vouch. So if they mess up, you're going to pay? Yeah. Krishna's saying that. Because he promised he'd preserve what you lack and carry what you lack and preserve what you had just a few verses ago. And now he's making good on that promise and he's saying really clearly, this is what I mean. I mean, even if they're very, very sinful, I'm going to rectify them. And therefore none of you should think ill of them. And I'm saying it. They'll never perish. Because I'm going to quickly pick them up. Do you guys see how I'm reading the verses? You see the flow? It's not incongruent with what anybody said, but it's my own little take on it. I'm making a lot out of that. I'll carry them what they lack and preserve what they have. And then Krishna's now, in many ways, restating that in a very practical way that continues to glorify the miraculous and special nature of devotion. And I guess the reason why I like Dom's point so much is because it fits so well with mine, that they're no longer in the law of karma. They're now joined at the hip with me. None of this troubleshoots the verse. The verse says a sinful person should only be thought of as saintly, provided they're worshiping Krishna. But leads you to the question of, well, but if they were worshiping Krishna and thinking of no one else and devoted to no one else but Krishna, then how could they do anything sinful? And it seems to be antinomianism, that you can think one thing but then do something completely different, and that's okay. It seems to be promoting sinful behavior and a lack of standards and rules and logic even. And so our commentators notice this also. And so we have to troubleshoot this a little bit. So number one, it's hyperbole. Of course a devotee would never do something simple. But even if they did, you should still think of them as sadhu. But of course they haven't, so whatever discrepancies you're seeing are very, very small. One way to resolve this verse is to say it's hyperbole. Krishna's really trying to say the devotees are so glorious and so special that even if they were to do something sinful, you should still think of them as sadhus. And then we would say to Krishna, but how could we think of them as sadhus if they're behaving sinfully? And Krishna says, no, they would never do that. They're saintly. But even if they did do that, you should still think of them that way. But because they're not doing that, then there's no problem. I'm just being hyperbolic and saying even if they did do that, you should think of them as saintly, even though they would never do that because I'm in their heart and they're devoted to me, and so therefore they would never do something sinful. Imagine, for example, I see you all confused. So imagine, for example, that I'm trying to say that I believe in Bailey. Bailey and Aurora got engaged. Yesterday? 2 days ago. Yesterday. Bailey and Aurora got engaged yesterday. He gave her a beautiful blue sapphire ring, super sweet, on the bluffs in Newport Beach. Total surprise, just the two of them. No photos, nobody, super intimate. She loved the ring. Has been thinking about it for a while, took the blessings of her mom and dad and his own parents. Really nice, really well done. Kind of a perfect ceremony. Kind of a perfect, I guess, engagement. It wasn't really a ceremony, but a perfect engagement. Imagine if I said to Aurora or whoever, actually I did do this, I vouched for Bailey to Aurora's father, who was my old friend. Bizarrely, we were great buddies 30 years ago. We hung out a bunch 30 years ago. And then I didn't even know Aurora was like my adopted daughter for years, and I didn't even know who her dad was. And then I found out who her dad was. I was like, oh my God, who would have thunk it? We were brahmacharis together, traveling together and spending time together, and then, we end up, being so close to my whole family ends up being so close to your daughter. So I told the dad, I go, you should bless it. Yeah. He's a good boy. I vouch for him. I'm sure he's a good boy. I'm sure he'll take good care of her. I don't have any doubts about him. I've vetted him for you. I did say that. I meant it and I said it. And I could say, listen, even if he did make some mistake, even if he blew into something bad, I still really believe in Bailey. Under no circumstance should you think he's not qualified to be with your daughter. He hasn't done anything that I'm aware of, and I don't think he's done anything wrong. In fact, I know he hasn't done anything wrong. But even if he did do something wrong, he's of such good character that even if he did do something wrong, he would rectify himself. And you should still get her engaged, because you don't find people like that with good hearts. Could I logically make that statement? Would it be meaningful? Would it be consistent? Would it make sense to you if you were the father who was being asked for his blessings? Would you understand what I was trying to say about that person? I'm using some hyperbole. I'm using a hypothetical. I'm not necessarily intending for it to be taken literally, but I am trying to communicate just how much confidence I have in this person. That's one way to resolve it. Another way to resolve, and one of our commentators resolves it that way. Another way to resolve it is to just take the bulls by the horns, and just fully embrace Krishna's radical statement. I prefer this way. I like the other way, but I prefer this way. And this is done by some of our commentators as well, specifically by Vishwanath Chakravarti. He says, if you think of them as anything less than a sadhu, Krishna's saying, if you think of these people as less than a sadhu, then you are going against my instruction. I am ordering you to only think of them as a sadhu, even if they're a murderer, no matter what they've done. It's a radical position. And here's the thing. Theologically, if you are an eternal soul and you are inherently good, which you don't even have to accept that one. You just have to accept that God's all good and all powerful. Because if God's all good, he would want you to be inherently good. If God's all powerful, he could make you inherently good. And this world is consistent with souls being inherently good but covered over. And in fact, if God made some souls bad, or you could be permanently made bad, then God wouldn't be either all good, because why would he want that? Why would he want you to be fundamentally broken, ever? And also, God might not be all powerful because he couldn't create the best of all possible worlds, which would be a world where even though you would have free will and could make mistakes, he would always inherently be good. And so if you believe God's all good and all powerful, you have to believe that God created the best of all possible worlds. And the best of all possible worlds is a world where we're inherently good. And that's consistent with the world we live in. We can just be covered over. But there can always be goodness within everybody. As such, you can always be rectified. As such, by devotion to God, you can always be rectified. You can have a transformation, a metamorphosis. You can go through some catharsis, some dark night of the soul, and you can grow and become a better version of yourself. And you can have committed the worst crimes imaginable. And you can purify yourself. If you don't believe that, then you don't believe God's all-powerful. And if you don't believe God would want to do that, you don't believe God's all good. Not only would an all-good and all-powerful God want to create a world in which you were inherently good no matter what you did, he'd also want to create a world where you could always be rectified no matter what you've done. And to put a timestamp on, like, you can only be rectified after 1,000,000 years, or even after 1 year, would be ridiculous. Why? Why wouldn't it be you can be rectified when you're ready to accept my mercy, accept my grace, and be rectified? You simply can't believe that people are condemned ever, for any reason, permanently. Now, at this point, it bears mentioning that when discussing these types of issues, we should always state clearly that we believe that we should follow the laws of this great country. Laws that incarcerate murderers, for example, should be kept in effect. And because a society can't be maintained without a system of punishment for people who break the laws and hurt other people, and there has to be a group of people in any society that commit violence on behalf of the lawmakers to force people to comply with the laws. And that's what the police force is. It's a bunch of armed men who drive around town in modified and fortified vehicles with lethal weapons in order to force people to follow the rules. And if you refuse to follow the rules, at some point it gets worse and worse till eventually they arrest you and put you in a metal box, or they shoot you. And it has to be there. Because without the threat of potential lethal force, there's nothing to stop bad people from doing bad stuff. The only thing stopping a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That statement's true. That's not a statement about Second Amendment. You could still say, and only the police should carry guns. You follow? But if you believe in a police force, and if you don't think you believe in a police force, you're just not thinking about it hard enough. You're just not thinking about it. Like if you don't believe in the fire department, you're just not thinking about it. You're not aware of what happens when fires are left, undealt with, and how much havoc they can wreak. One of the benefits of a civilization is that there's law and order, and there's law and order precisely because there's punishments attached to doing bad things. Which is why someone can go to prison and be in prison for life and be forgiven for their sins by a priest and still be executed. Or be forgiven by the person they committed the crime against and still be kept in prison and not paroled. It's two different things. One is the maintenance of a functioning society, and the other one is someone's ability to feel remorse, to be rectified, to be sanctified through that remorse, to feel penitent. That's where we get the word penitentiary from, to feel penitent and remorseful. And so this verse is making a really heavy point. It's saying that a devotee, by dint of their devotion, will be rectified from whatever discrepancy there is in their mindset and their behavior. Because Krishna is just that merciful. And you may commit yourself to the process of devotion sincerely while you still have issues. And then Krishna will work his magic with you. But when we see a green mango attached to a tree, we call it a mango, even though it's not edible. Because we know in due course of time, the green mango, by dint of being connected to the tree, will become ripe and edible, and therefore we still call it a mango. And to not call it a mango is to ignore what's actually happening with its connection to the tree and what's happening to that mango. And it becomes a deficiency in you. Sometimes we say only the person you wrong can forgive you. It's true, and it's also not true. Could God forgive you? Could somebody choose to be bitter and never forgive you for something you've done to them? And God choose to forgive you? Yes, obviously. And so we're talking here about God's forgiveness and God's blessing and God's grace and God's confidence and God stepping in for you. And you need verses like this. And they challenge the neat cookie-cutter versions of justice that we conceive of. And it's hard sometimes to let our conceptions of justice be modified by this. Partially because we don't realize how justice can work on two levels. There can be a divine justice and also a worldly justice, a divine forgiveness and a worldly system of crime and punishment based on, like karmic. You do something, you get a result. In fact, sometimes they do take parole into effect. One of the guys who was part of the Manson gang got paroled in 1976. His nickname was Clem. He got paroled in 1976. Another one, Tex Watson, who actually committed the murders, has been denied parole, I think, 18 times. Although he became a Christian minister in the 70s, got married, had 4 kids, because they were allowing for conjugal visits. And, spent, I guess, like 50 years now being a pastor. Maybe he's rectified himself. The crimes they committed were horrific. They killed Sharon Tate, who was 8.5 months pregnant. Just awful stuff. Terrible stuff. But who's to say? Maybe he's rectified himself. He doesn't have to get let out of prison. And maybe the family should never forgive him. But if he's felt appropriate remorse and he's rectified himself in his heart and he's done the best he can do given his mistakes, I think God could forgive him. And it's kind of the ramifications of believing in God, and all good and all powerful God, is you have to grapple with these concepts. And they're challenging. We sometimes take someone's mental state into account when they get paroled. They've made good use of their time. They've done good time. You get time off for good behavior. If you admit your mistake, that sometimes gets you a lesser sentence. There's all sorts of things like this that are actually in our legal system acknowledging the value of remorse. The very word penitentiary means a place where you feel penitent. And so the radical embracing of what Krishna says is not actually that radical. And the only thing we have to do is understand that there are two levels the law works on, and we're not trying to supersede the legal system. We're talking about a divine law, a divine principle, rather. That God's forgiveness is available to everybody, and that if someone becomes a devotee, that act of becoming a devotee, that act of welcoming God in your heart, that act of orienting yourself towards a good and all-powerful God is therapeutic. It's prophylactic. It's purifying. It changes the world in which you live. It changes you. You become better. How can you call yourself a devotee if you don't believe such miracles are possible? To make it succinct, part of the price of believing in an all-good and all-powerful God is that you believe that God would have created the best of all possible worlds. And the best of all possible worlds is a world where no one is inherently evil. And a world in which no one is permanently cast out. And we can have a legal system, and that needs to just stay in place and function for the maintenance of society. But on another level, through the power of bhakti, through the power of grace, through the power of remorse, through a synergistic relationship with the divine, we can be rectified. Very sinful, very low people can be made good because they're connected to Krishna. And that green mango connected to that tree is still called a mango, even when it's unripe. And so Krishna is speaking about a devotee in an unripened stage. In the ripened stage, there would be no sin. But most of us don't come to Krishna in that ripened stage. In fact, coming to Krishna is what ripens us. And we come with a bunch of hang-ups and issues, and we have to grow up and make our mistakes in bhakti. Prabhupada hones in on this a little bit in the purport, where he says, one should not misunderstand that a devotee in transcendental devotional service can act in all kinds of abominable ways. This verse only refers to an accident due to the strong power of material connections. Devotional service is more or less a declaration of war against the illusory energy. Put that on a t-shirt. Devotional service is more or less a declaration of war against the illusory energy. You declare war, and then you conduct war. We made the Declaration of Independence, and then we fought the Revolutionary War. At least I think that's how it happened. I'm assuming that's how it happened. If it didn't happen that way, that'd be a little weird. Fingers crossed. As long as one is not strong enough to fight the illusory energy, there may be accidental fall downs. But when strong enough, he's no longer subject to such fall downs, as previously explained. No one should take advantage of this verse and commit nonsense and think that he's still a devotee. If he does not improve his character by devotional service, let's be understood that he is not a high devotee. Interestingly, Prabhupada said that he's not a devotee. Prabhupada doesn't go that far. He's not a high devotee. He's not a sincere devotee. He's not a complete devotee. He's not a full devotee. But Prabhupada, understanding the verse, refuses to say he's not a devotee at all. The verse is practical. It uses radical language. And it's powerful. It almost slaps you in the face. It almost seems hyperbolic. Enough so that some of our commentators say it's hyperbolic. And towards a high devotee it would be hyperbolic because they would never commit any bad act. But towards a low, beginner, green mango devotee who's made that declaration of war against Maya and is just beginning to conduct that war against Maya, but doesn't have much strength, doesn't have much realization, but has some sincerity. They may fall. They may do bad stuff. They may even do really bad stuff. We don't know what the really bad stuff is. We can't say. It just says really bad behavior. Is that felonious assault? Is that misdemeanor assault? We don't know what's involved, right? We don't need to split hairs on this. But if you want to really get into it, is Hitler redeemable?
Yes.
How could you believe in an all-graceful God and an all-merciful God and not believe there's a shot for Hitler? It's heavy. So although Krishna doesn't specify what it means to be greatly misbehaved, we can just go ahead and take the most extreme examples we can think of. Could such people become devotees? Could such people feel penitent? Could such people feel remorse? Could such people receive the grace of Krishna? Is Krishna turned away from them forever? Is there no hope for those people? If there is no hope for them, what does that say about the nature of God? Certainly the Krishna conception of divinity means there's hope for everybody, including all of us. And it's just the ramifications of believing in an all-good and all-powerful God are very severe. They require you to ultimately see the good in everyone and to forgive everybody. You can still have prisons, still believe in capital punishment, but in your heart, you have to see the good in everybody and be willing to allow for miracles to occur. And in fact, if that's a devotee, you have to expect that they're going to occur in due course of time. I prefer taking the verse straight. I think its import is best understood when you read it straight. And what I attempted to do with you guys today was to show you that as radical as the verse sounds at a glance, and as extreme as a position as the verse presents, and as much as we might want to go with the idea that's just hyperbole, you can just take the verse straight, and it works. It's just what it means to believe in God. And that's tough because, it's like most of us aren't having to deal with forgiving Hitler. Most of us just have to forgive our parents for, the mistake they made while feeding us and clothing us and sending us to school and putting a roof over our head and all the other things they did for us. Most of us need to forgive our friends, people who've wronged us, people who've triggered us, disturbed us. Mostly the stuff that we hold on to and we're angry about is pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. Sometimes you've been through something big. Sometimes somebody's been sexually assaulted as a child or as an adult. There's some big stuff. Sometimes people have been, severely wronged, severely violated, severely traumatized. And those things are tough to forgive, tough to let go of. Being a devotee means you need to ultimately forgive everybody, including yourself. Still believing in the system of law. But we ultimately have to let it all go. Same way Christians want to let it all go. See the good in people, wish them well, leave that door open for them to receive the grace of God. Have a bigger vision. See the world through Krishna's lens. Appreciate the brilliance of it, appreciate the goodness of that, and strive to model that in our own lives as pure souls. the verse is maybe the heaviest verse in the whole Gita. Another way to interpret the verse, and this is the last thing I'll say, is, Arjuna was going to have to go kill all his family members. So even if you have to do the worst thing, like I'm asking you to do right now, it'll be okay. You can also interpret the verse in a very literal way. That Arjuna is just he's worried about committing a sinful act and going and killing all his relatives. And Krishna's saying, no, even if you do that worst thing, you'll only be a sadhu. You'll never gain infamy for that. You'll only be glorified. And in fact, it's true, Arjuna is glorified. For millennia. Krishna's words are true. We're sitting here today glorifying Arjuna and his conversation with Krishna. Krishna's devotee never perishes. Even he had to fight in this horrible war, do horrible things, kill his relatives. If you just stay devoted to me, right? And you're okay. I'll make you dharmic. Kshipram bhavati dharmama. Quickly he is a dharmic soul. It's interesting because you can't say quickly he is. It has to be quickly he becomes. But the verb, bhavati, is present tense, first person, singular. He is. That's how fast it is. Krishna rectifies him quickly. And we see this with devotees time and time again. That good devotees, if they make a mistake, Krishna cleans them up. Gives them some karma and cleans them right up. And they just stumble and then regain their footing and keep going forward. We shouldn't think just because you have a spiritual name, you're a devotee. Shouldn't think just because you wear neck beads, you're a devotee. Shouldn't think just because you chant a few rounds, you're a devotee. That's another way to deal with this verse. Because real devotees are in an intimate relationship with Krishna, and you see it. Krishna works on them. He melts them to mold them. And they become bright and forgiving and deep as the ocean and pious and good. And their sins and bad qualities, they wash off. Just like dirt in a shower. Just because you came to the temple a couple times doesn't make you a devotee. Because you hung out with us doesn't make you a devotee. Just because you know devotees doesn't make you a devotee. You follow? And you got to remember that sometimes. You start thinking you're all that, but you're not. You're just standing next to somebody who's all that. You're basking in their light. You get out of their light, you're in darkness. Devotees bring light everywhere they go, illuminating light. Once in a while, such a great devotee will have difficulty, and she just picks themselves up right away. Learns some valuable lessons, moves forward in their spiritual life. Not that, you chant a few rounds for a few days and then became a crack addict. You follow? Although I will say this. There was a devotee named Sudama who Prabhupada loved a lot. Sudama was black, American, male, leader in the early movement. Took sannyas. And a sannyasi in those days was like a mahaguru, a few sannyasis in the movement. He went to Japan, and he was the first devotee to go to Japan at Prabhupada's behest and preached there. Prabhupada was so happy with him. He one time said he was going to personally ask Bhaktivinoda Thakur to take him back to Godhead. Sudama also, as a sannyasi, fell down numerous times with brahmacharis at the temple. He was gay too. And got kicked out of the movement. Prabhupada brought him back a few times. He left, got kicked out. Prabhupada brought him back, gave him back his danda, let him be a sannyasi again. Eventually he left for good. Decades passed. Decades. And in the late 90s, Sudama was living in some halfway house in San Francisco in abject poverty. Halfway through a transition from male to female. So it was trans. I think he'd been involved in prostitution and was a drug addict. Like, really bad situation. And he was dying of AIDS. And Tamal Krishnamaj, also one of Prabhupada's early disciples, flew up to the Bay Area, found Sudama, and forced him to come with him down to Los Angeles, where they put him in an apartment across the street from the temple, and the whole Los Angeles devotee community adopted him as he was dying of AIDS. Cooked for him, did kirtan for him day in and day out for months. And he left the world in an apartment in Los Angeles, right across from the temple, surrounded by devotees, chanting the holy name. Was gone for decades. And even when he was a devotee, he was a spotty devotee at best, and abused his leadership position and seduced young men, and I think that would qualify as sexual assault, probably legally, for sure civilly. For sure civilly, maybe also criminally. I don't know what the age was. But he'd done some sincere service and then strayed far away from the path. And I don't even like to name him, but I name him because I think it's important to know that this is a real person. And you look at his life, and Krishna dragged him back into the midst of devotees when he was too weak to do anything else after a lifetime of sinful activity. Had more time out than in. Did terrible stuff while he was in. Did terrible stuff while he was out. Abused his power. So many things. I don't even want to say them because de mortuis nil nisi bonum. You only say good things about the dead. Nothing but the good of the dead. It's not our culture to speak ill of those who have passed on. But I'm only saying it. Krishna's Kaviraj says, I'm saying this so that the Lord's mercy is known to everybody. We need to try and be real devotees. We need to try and bring people up around us to be real devotees. But there are wild stories, not just in the Bhagavatam, of people who did extremely sinful things. But they'd done some service. And in their heart, there was some bhakti. And Krishna dragged them back. Wouldn't let them go. Who knows? Sudama might have gone back to Godhead. After a Jagai and Madhai-like life. Who knows? He left the world surrounded by devotees, chanting the holy name, who all fell in love with him, who all really cared about him. You got to read verses like this, and they should make you think. They should be challenging. All right, thank you. Give me some feedback. Just